My coworker tried to flirt with my boyfriend right in front of me. I made sure she understood exactly whose man she was looking at. My coworker Ingrid and I worked in the same department for 2 years before she decided to cross a line I didn't know needed defending. We weren't close friends, but we were friendly enough. We ate lunch together sometimes. We chatted about weekend plans and complained about deadlines. I thought we had a normal professional relationship built on mutual respect and basic decency. I was wrong about the respect part. My boyfriend Corbin and I had been together for 3 years when everything happened. He was kind and loyal and completely devoted to our relationship. He worked in construction and sometimes picked me up from work when my car was in the shop or when we had dinner plans right after my shift. He would wait in the lobby reading his phone until I came down, and then we would walk out together holding hands. It was simple and sweet, and I never thought twice about it. Ingrid noticed Corbin immediately the first time he came to pick me up. She happened to be in the lobby when we met, and her eyes followed him from the moment he stood up to greet me. She asked who that was, and I proudly introduced him as my boyfriend. She smiled and said I was lucky to have someone so handsome waiting for me. I thanked her and thought nothing of it. The next time Corbin came to the office, Ingrid made a point to come downstairs even though she had no reason to be in the lobby. She walked over and reintroduced herself like they hadn't already met. She touched his arm while she talked and laughed at things he said that weren't jokes. She asked questions about his job and his hobbies and acted fascinated by every answer. Corbin looked uncomfortable and kept glancing at me like he wasn't sure what was happening. I cut the conversation short and we left quickly. I told Corbin that Ingrid was just being friendly and he shouldn't worry about it. He said something felt off about the interaction, but he trusted my judgment. I thought maybe I was being paranoid, and Ingrid was just naturally flirtatious with everyone. I decided to give her the benefit of the doubt. That was a mistake. Over the next few weeks, Ingrid found reasons to be in the lobby every single time Corbin came to the office. She always had an excuse. She needed to check the mail. She was waiting for a delivery. She wanted some air. The excuses were thin and the timing was suspicious, but I didn't confront her because I kept hoping I was misreading the situation. Then she started asking questions about him when he wasn't there. She asked how we met and how long we'd been together and whether things were serious. She asked if we ever took breaks from each other. She asked if Corbin ever mentioned thinking other women were attractive. The questions felt like probing for weaknesses, like she was looking for cracks she could exploit. I answered vaguely and changed the subject every time. The situation escalated at our company holiday party. Spouses and partners were invited and Corbin came as my date. He looked handsome in his button-down shirt and I was proud to have him beside me. We mingled with my coworkers and made small talk and everything felt normal until Ingrid appeared. She was wearing a dress that showed more than it covered. She made a direct line for us the moment she spotted Corbin across the room. She ignored me completely and started talking to him about how nice it was to see him outside the office. She asked if he was having fun and if the drinks were good and if he wanted to dance later. She put her hand on his chest while she talked like she had the right to touch him. I watched this happen while standing right next to them. Corbin stepped back and said he was fine and he was there with me. Ingrid laughed and said of course he was, but surely he could spare one dance for a friend. She called herself his friend, like they had any relationship beyond her lurking in lobbies to intercept him. Corbin said no thanks and put his arm around my waist. Ingrid looked at me for the first time and said I was lucky he was so loyal. She said most men would have taken her up on the offer by now. Then she winked at Corbin and walked away like she had done nothing wrong. I was furious, but I didn't make a scene at the party. I smiled and danced with Corbin and pretended everything was fine while planning exactly how I would handle this situation. Confronting Ingrid directly would give her satisfaction. Reporting her to HR would seem petty since nothing technically inappropriate happened at work. I needed a different approach. The next week, I started being incredibly helpful to Ingrid in ways she didn't want. Every time she made a mistake on a project, I pointed it out in meetings instead of privately. Every time she missed a deadline, I mentioned it to our supervisor with concern about her workload. Every time she took a long lunch or left early, I noted it casually in conversation with people who tracked those things. I became her most attentive colleague. I noticed everything she did and made sure others noticed too. Hashtag I started taking notes on everything Ingrid did wrong at work. When she submitted a client proposal with wrong budget numbers, I forwarded it to Freya with a quick note about wanting to double-check the math. When she showed up 20 minutes late to a team meeting, I mentioned to our project manager that I'd covered her portion of the presentation. When she forgot to update the shared calendar, I sent a helpful reminder to the whole team about keeping schedules current. Every mistake became an opportunity to look concerned and professional while making sure the right people noticed her slipping performance. The documentation piled up in small ways that seemed innocent individually, but painted a clear picture when anyone looked at the pattern. 3 weeks after the holiday party, Freya called Ingrid into the glass-walled conference room. I watched Ingrid sitting rigid while Freya gestured at papers. I felt warm satisfaction watching her squirm under criticism I'd carefully orchestrated. Ingrid started arriving at 7 instead of her usual 8:30. She stayed until 6 or 7, hunched over her desk. People stopped asking her opinion in meetings. Freya started reviewing her work more carefully. The project manager assigned her smaller responsibilities. I caught her watching me sometimes with this suspicious look like she was connecting the dots between my helpfulness and her professional decline, but she couldn't prove anything because I'd been so careful. One evening evening, Corbin mentioned something weird. Ingrid had messaged him on social media asking about technical details from my work. Another attempt to create private contact using my work as a flimsy excuse. He'd blocked her immediately. I felt cold anger knowing Ingrid still hadn't learned to stay away from what was mine. 2 days later, I got an email from Conrad in HR asking me to come by his office. Someone had complained. Definitely Ingrid. Conrad talked about maintaining professional relationships and making sure everyone felt supported. He didn't name Ingrid directly, but we both knew. I nodded and acted concerned while calculating how much trouble I was actually in. The meeting forced me to pull back, but I realized I'd already done enough damage. Ingrid's reputation was destroyed among the people who mattered. I could stop actively sabotaging her and just watch the consequences play out naturally. I promised Conrad I'd be more supportive, using the exact corporate language he wanted to hear. I left feeling like I'd gotten away with something important. The next week, Ingrid started being overly friendly. She smiled too brightly in hallways. She complimented my presentation. The friendliness felt desperate and calculated. I matched her fake politeness with my own artificial warmth. We had weird conversations where both of us smiled while everyone watching could tell it was completely fake. Corbin brought up the whole situation one night. He said he was worried about how much energy I was putting into destroying Ingrid professionally. He supported me completely but gently suggested maybe I'd already won and should let it go. His words made me defensive. I told him Ingrid deserved everything she got. He said he just wanted me to be happy instead of focused on revenge, then changed the subject. His concern stuck with me. I found out through office gossip that Ingrid was going through a messy divorce. Her ex had been cheating for over a year. They were fighting over money and custody of their dog. The information made me deeply uncomfortable. Suddenly, her desperate pursuit of Corbin made more psychological sense. She'd been dealing with betrayal at home while trying to hold her professional life together, then fixated on my loyal boyfriend as proof that good men existed. It didn't excuse her behavior at all, but understanding her motivation made my revenge feel more complicated. The department head called a team meeting about professionalism. He didn't name anyone, but everyone knew. The meeting was painfully awkward. Coworkers stared at their laptops. Ingrid looked like she wanted to disappear. After everyone filed out, Ingrid asked if we could talk privately. She took a breath and said she knew she'd crossed lines with Corbin. She admitted she'd been inappropriate and disrespectful. She apologized for making things weird at work. I realized she was probably more scared about losing her job than actually sorry. Her divorce was draining her money. The apology felt 60% genuine and 40% self-preservation. I accepted it with the coldest professional tone I could manage. I told her we could work together civilly, but we were never going to be friends again. I said she needed to stay completely away from Corbin. No more lobby visits, no more questions about him, no contact whatsoever. She agreed immediately, looking relieved I wasn't pushing to get her fired. 3 weeks later, Ingrid made one final attempt. Corbin was waiting in the parking lot when she approached asking for help with her car. She claimed it wouldn't start. He told her no and texted me from the lobby. We walked out together. Her car started fine when she drove away 30 seconds later. I arrived early the next morning and waited by Ingrid's desk. She jumped when she saw me. I told her in very clear terms that if she ever approached Corbin again, I would make her previous work problems look like nothing. I said to consider the parking lot incident her final warning. I saw actual fear in her eyes. She nodded quickly and promised it wouldn't happen again. Freya stopped by later that week. She said she was aware there had been personal conflict between us. She couldn't take sides officially, but appreciated that I'd kept things professional lately. Then she mentioned that Ingrid was on thin ice performance-wise. She doubted Ingrid would last another year in the department. I understood she was telling me my revenge campaign had worked. I sat at my desk feeling victorious and slightly sick. That Friday, Corbin surprised me with a weekend at a cabin in the mountains. We spent 3 days hiking and cooking simple meals. The tension in my shoulders finally released. We talked about how the situation had tested our relationship. Corbin said he was proud of how we'd handled it. He said a lot of couples would have let something like that create distance, but we'd communicated honestly the whole time. Monday, I saw an email about team reorganizations. Ingrid had been moved to a different project team that rarely interacted with mine. They were separating us permanently. That night, I lay in bed replaying everything I'd done. I'd systematically damaged her professional reputation. She definitely deserved consequences, but I'd used sabotage tactics that could have gotten her fired while she was going through a divorce. Corbin found me staring at the ceiling. He listened without judgment. He said what mattered was that I recognized the complexity now. That's what made me different from someone who would do that without any regret. 3 months passed. The active hostility faded into cautious mutual avoidance. We nodded politely in hallways. We sat on opposite sides during meetings. One afternoon, I needed a file Ingrid had worked on. I sent her a quick email. She responded within 10 minutes with the exact file path. No fake friendliness, no underlying tension, just straightforward work interaction. The permanent wariness would never disappear completely, but the burning anger had cooled into something cold and distant. We'd found a way to exist in the same professional space. A week later, Corbin texted asking me to meet him on our apartment balcony. He'd lit candles on the small table. The sunset looked orange and pink behind the buildings. He told me the past few months had been harder than anything we'd faced before. Watching me deal with Ingrid's behavior and then question my own actions showed him exactly who I was. We communicated communicated honestly even when it was uncomfortable. He pulled a small box from his pocket and opened it to show me a simple gold ring. I said yes before he finished the question and felt tears starting. We stood there holding each other while the city noise continued around us. Our relationship survived a test I never expected to face. The methods I used still felt morally complicated, but Corbin was mine and I was his, and we'd proven we could handle difficult situations together.